Hey everyone, it's Anna. Before we jump into today's episode, I just wanted to let all of you know that our guest was amazing and we ended up talking to her for over 3 hours because we completely lost track of time. So, no, I am not going to make you sit through a 3-hour long podcast episode. However, if you would do that for us, you're amazing. We love you. I did edit this podcast and I broke it up into 2 chunks. So we are releasing the first part right now. That's the episode you're going to hear today. And then next week, we are releasing part 2. So in this episode that you're about to hear, we talk about our guest's background, how she grew up. We talk about the law of attraction, this amazing, incredible love story that is like nothing you've ever heard before. We talk about moving on from like not feeling worthy and finding your value, finding your worth. We talk about stripping. We talk about sex. We talk about addiction. I am going to do a trigger warning for this episode because we do discuss some abuse, rape, sexual assault, and then there is some talk of suicide as well, and then drug addiction. So just heads up. And then next week when you hear part 2, we do talk more about self-worth, value, a little bit more of like glowing up. And we also get pretty deep on OnlyFans next week, anal hooks. So if you remember the episode with Lauren where we talked about anal hooks, we're going to go further into the conversation about anal hooks. Oh, and then we also discuss getting on apps just for sex and talk about some of that stuff. So really a lot to hear. It's a really, really fun episode. We hope you enjoy it. And as always, let us know what you think. Welcome to the Naked Peaches. I'm Anna.
I'm Taylor.
And I'm Allyse. I'm the guest for today. I'm so excited.
Yes,
we're so excited to have you here.
We are so pumped. So, okay, a little bit of a background. And I got some feedback recently about the pod that I'm going to incorporate today. So everyone was like, oh, you guys talk. And then like 10 minutes in, you finally tell us what you're talking about today. And so I'm like, oh, well, we'll put that at the beginning and then we'll get into everything we're talking about.
Feedback.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you to there was at least 4 people this last week that told me. So thank you. But we're talking about like a really wide array of topics today. So we're talking about relationships. Yes. We're talking about boundaries. We're talking about consent. We're talking about butt stuff. We're talking about
butt hooks.
Yeah.
Get ready.
It's going to be a wild one today.
I feel like also finding your worth is a big part of what we're talking about today.
Yes. I think when I thought about what I wanted to talk about, that was the general theme, and that my worth and how I view it and how I discovered it changed a lot over the course of my life. And I think that some people might not be at this point yet. Some people might be at this point. And I thought that might be a really helpful thing to talk about.
Yeah. I think it's a journey that a lot of people I think everyone's on it all the time. So I think hearing just your entire story, which is an impressive one about it, is going to be really beneficial to people. Yeah. And just a little background on you, just so that people know. So we met last month because you came in for a shoot. And we were sitting in Glam chatting, as we do with every shoot. And I was just like floored by our entire conversation. I immediately left. I like was telling all the girlies at work, I'm like, she's so amazing. I love her. We had the best convo today. It was so fun. And then we were like, we need her on the pod because everyone just needs to hear everything. Like I feel like we talked about 70 different topics in the, hour and a half that you were getting your glam done. So I'm just really excited to like explore a lot of that today.
Yeah, I feel like it was one of those moments where we clicked and we were like, oh my God, we love her. We're obsessed with her. She's one of us. Like,
yes.
And I felt the same way right away. So it just aligned really well.
Yeah.
And you guys are amazing.
You barely even needed us to show you poses.
Oh my God.
She's a posing queen.
Yeah, you're a posing pro.
We love.
Yes.
I do it a lot.
Yeah.
But it was still unlike any other experience I had ever had. And I think that my favorite part was just how much fun I had. Aww. And how I felt when I left. Like, even before I saw the pictures. The pictures were just, like, the insane icing on the cake.
Yeah.
It was more that I was like, I left and I was like, I had so much fun. I want to be there every day. I want to be with them every day. It was so fun.
Okay, well, we want to be with you every day, too. Yeah. So it's mutual.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Are we going to kiss?
Yeah.
Right? Are we making out now? Yeah.
Just to kind of kick it off, like, one of the things that you talked about a lot when we first all talked about this was how you've been on this like glow up journey. And I feel like we need to just kind of give the people like a background of what that means for you.
Okay. So we'll start at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And I'll try to keep it high level.
I mean, we got time.
Yeah, we have time.
Okay, good.
Dive in. We're a long format podcast.
Okay, good.
Yeah, don't worry.
Because I think we're going to go down some roads.
Yes.
Always.
That'll be really fun. But I grew up in a family where addiction and abuse was prevalent right out of the gate. Both of my parents were IV drug users and got pregnant at 18 and had me when they were both 19. So they were very immature, addicted to drugs. It just wasn't good. My mom almost gave me up for adoption. My dad had asked her to. I mean, he was just trying to be smart he's just like, I don't think we're it. But she just couldn't do it. She was already in love with me, and she went to treatment, and her sponsor, like, as she's in the hospital, was like, if you want to keep this baby, because I think you do, I'll help you do it. And that was all of the support that my mom needed to keep me.
Wow.
But I still, I grew up still in that environment.
Did your mom get sober and stay sober?
No, she relapsed a couple of times when I was really young. And then later it was just a lot of abusing alcohol. So the person she got, my dad, that she got pregnant with, he's gay, but they grew up in a very small town. And so she was his best friend. They were doing drugs anyway. And he was just like, well, I could try to be straight with you. You're my best friend. But that's why they never got married. But my dad is an amazing man. And he did get sober, like, on his own. Without going to treatment. And he's been with his husband since I was like 7, I think. I was the reason that they got together. Yeah.
How'd that happen?
Well, he was asking my dad out a bunch, and my dad was just not giving him the time of day. And then he took me to, like, a Super Bowl party where all of their friends were hanging out. And this is going to sound so inappropriate. It was the 80s, you guys. But they had a who had the best butt contest. And they were like, well, we need an unbiased judge. So let's pick the child. Let's pick the child to, like, choose the best butt. Looking back, I'm, like, horrified, but that's what happened. And I chose Chris, and then he started dating him, and they got married much later in life, obviously, but have been together since I was 7. And then my mom, I know. Then my mom met my stepdad when I was 5, and she got pregnant with him, and so they decided to get married. And so they had my sister, and then 14 months later had my other sister. So really close back to back. That was a lot of stress. There was a lot of financial stress. There was a lot of drinking. There was a lot of unhealthy parenting environment. And I don't think I ever thought anything bad about me, like I'm bad or I'm, not worthy. I never had, like, that conscious thought that I placed on myself, but there were a lot of experiences that showed me that I was not important, or that I wasn't good enough, or that things were my fault. And I took a lot of that out on my sisters when we were very small, which they don't remember, but I did apologize to them and talk to them about what that looked like, and repaired that with them. And then as I got older, it was a lot of drugs and not doing well in school, and essentially just the actions that someone who didn't have very high self-worth and self-esteem would do, but I didn't ever go around thinking that about me. Like, there was a disconnect. And even my mom would say, like, why do you have this issue with your worthiness? And I said, I don't. I think I'm worth everything. But I would choose things that felt safe and felt comfortable because I had grown up in the environment that I had grown up in, and the way that I perceived love was not very healthy. Mm-hmm. And so in high school, I was not a very good kid. I was doing a lot of drugs, and my sisters, were both in basketball, and my stepdad was the coach along with some high school boys that were coaching. And Kelly was one of the coaches, who is my now fiance, for everybody listening, just so we're tracking with the story. So we actually met in high school because he was coaching them. And he says that as soon as he saw me, that he knew. He's like, I have to know who she is. I have to talk to her. And he was very innocent. He grew up very sheltered. He, I think, had kissed, like, I don't even know if he had kissed anybody before then. And we're like,
High school.
I don't even know if I was a virgin. Because it's like, it was very early in high school. Actually, I was a virgin. No, I wasn't. No, I definitely wasn't. Not really good with timelines.
No, it's fine.
It's okay,
but my
mom, construct,
right?
Yeah. It's part of the patriarchy.
But my mom he had heard my mom say something about how I wasn't doing well in school, and he was like, well, I could tutor her. Like, and so anything to like, just like be able to talk to me. And he was just, I perceived myself as, I don't know. I mean, I was doing a lot of drugs and not doing well in school. So even though I thought that I deserved certain things, I didn't think I offered a lot of value.
Okay.
I believed that I wanted to receive love and that I deserved to be well loved. But I also didn't think that I was good enough for him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's a saying in like 12-step recovery called the piece of shit that the world revolves around. And that's like how you think of yourself a lot of the time. And I feel like this is reminding me of that. Where
that
it's
is
like
a really good way of putting it.
This sense of like, you know, wanting everything and like not really being able to see things outside of your own perspective, but also like deep down you're sort of full of shame too.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is an excellent way to articulate it. And he was even courting me back then, and I'm talking old-fashioned courting. Very respectful, meaning I show up, for those who don't even know what that means anymore. It's very much, I am pursuing you in a very formal way, in a very respectful way, with the intent to marry you, or with the intent to, it's usually to marry you.
Yeah.
So like, what would he do to like show that?
A lot of things. So like, it has a lot to do with being there for me, wanting the best for me, showing up when I need it, offering a lot of guidance. But then even though he was like absolutely in love with me, he wouldn't touch me unless I wanted him to. He wouldn't kiss me unless I initiated it. And we never had sex until, like, I'll get to this part, but after we had dated, and after we were out of high school. And I have talked about it with him now, and I'm like, but I was like wanting you to just take me now.
Yeah,
and
just
he's
throw
like,
me onto the
and
counter.
he's like, no, you would have had to basically say, this is what I want, this is what we're doing, which I did later when we did.
Yeah.
Because he respected me so much. And he never, ever wanted to cross that boundary for his own pleasure, because he knew that I was different and he was very different. So it's a lot of that. I'm sure there's other ways to explain it.
Yeah.
We'll give it a Google. But at a high level, that's what courting is it's a very formal process. You're not having sex. You might not be kissing. Like, it's a very antiquated thing.
Like in
so
Bridgerton when they go on the
yes,
walks together.
Yeah. That is a great example of courting.
Promenading. That's
Promenading, yes.
It is. We are spending time together respectfully with chaperones if needed, with the intent that I'm going to marry you.
I love that. Bring back promenading.
Right? Right? I was like, who even gets courted anymore? But that's how he is. Like, I always say he's like Captain America, because he always does the right thing when no one's looking. He seems like he's 1,000 years older than he actually is. Like, he's like a grandpa in a young man's body.
Yeah.
And he always has been, even in high school. And so I used to give him so much shit for that. But I constantly was pushing it away. Being respected and loved and cared for, not expecting anything in return, and not selfishly, I had never had, not from any family member who was supposed to love me or care for me, not from any other relationship. And I hadn't even had very many great friendships at that point. So for him to be always pursuing me and loving me no matter how awful I was or bitchy or whatever, it just furthered that feeling of like, I'm not good enough for you. You need to just get away from me. And he's like, his frame of mind was, if I just love her well enough, long enough, she will realize that this is how it should have always been for me. I should have always been loved like this. I should have always been treated like this. And one of the things that helps now is looking back and seeing how steadfastly he did pursue me without getting anything from it. That says a lot about someone's love for you, their real love for you, not just what you give them.
How long did this go on where he was pursuing you?
Years.
This? Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which is crazy because it's like, this is a high school boy we're talking
Yeah.
about. You know,
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
Oh, that was it.
Yeah.
He thought, I'm going to lose my virginity to her. I'm going to marry her. I'm going to this is it. He had decided even then. And I was actually dating this horrible graffiti writer, felon.
Of course.
Because that was what felt safe. I'm
Yeah.
even though our relationship was very tumultuous, it still felt like, well, that's what love is. Mm-hmm. That's what feels right.
Yeah.
I know how to deal with that.
Yeah.
I don't know how to deal with you treating me this well. It's very uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And so I would break up with that boyfriend and spend time with Kelly. And then I would be like, oh, this is getting too real. And I'd go back to my boyfriend. And so that happened a lot. And especially, so even on top of how long he pursued me, he let me hurt him over and over and over again, and still was like, that's my person. Mm-hmm. Which I think had a big part in how my self-worth has evolved, just because it took someone else seeing it and calling it out and saying, this is who I see that you are. Mm-hmm. I know you don't see it yet, but that is who you are, and I can see your heart, and I know.
Did you have a sense of sorry, I can't.
No. I feel like I'll talk all the time. You guys ask me.
Okay.
So.
Did you have, when you were going back and forth to Kelly, did you have this sense of oh, it's kind of cringe that he likes me so much almost? Because I feel like that for me has been a big manifestation of low self-worth, is being kind of grossed out by someone who likes me. Because you're oh, what's wrong with you? Why would you like me? And you don't realize that's why you're thinking it, but you're oh my God, it's so embarrassing how they're so into me.
Yep.
And it's
and a lot of my friends felt that way. And even when we got back together, I had a friend who I was best friends with in high school that found out that we were dating as adults, and she was like, he's just so obsessed with you. And it's bitch, don't you want somebody to be obsessed with you?
Why are we dating these guys who don't give a fuck about us?
The life we deserve.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a very common thing. And yes, I did feel like that. I also admitted to him recently that I was I kind of thought you were a pussy. Mm-hmm. You never got mad at me. You never responded to my anger in anger. And you just took it. And there was definitely a part of me that was I need somebody to stand up to me, and that it was kind of a turnoff almost. Little did I know, he was actually beating the shit out of anyone who would ever say anything bad about me. He told me the story about how he got in a fight with someone over me, and that the guy said something disrespectful, and Kelly put him in a headlock, got kicked out of school, and I was how did that happen? And I didn't even hear about it. He's because I told everybody if they ever said anything to you that it would happen to them. Wow. And I was why? And he was a football player, and I was a cheerleader.
Stop.
This is an episode
the
of
cliches
Riverdale.
go on and on.
Was that for Friday Night Lights?
Friday Night Lights.
Yes.
It's giving Friday Night Lights.
Yes. And so in the locker room, if anybody was like, yeah, I'm going to fuck her. And like, he was like pushing guys into lockers and was like, you will speak to her about her with respect.
Wow, I wish someone had been doing that for me
Right?
in high school.
Well, and I told him, I was like, honestly, that probably hurt you, that strategy. If you had if I had known you were doing that, I probably would have been like,
yeah,
take me now. We're good to go.
Also,
He's like, I thought you'd think I was a monster. I thought you'd hate me.
Oh
And
my
I was like,
God.
no.
I love that you're just like pushing him away, and he's like acting like so chill that he's like pummeling kids. Yeah. He's like taking that anger and then like taking it out on us. It's like a chain of
Totally.
yeah.
Totally. Things are getting displaced all
Yeah.
over.
Yeah.
It was very messy. We were just messy kids. Mm-hmm. But I did push him away horribly.
Okay, and then you started dating this other guy. Like
I was dating him for a long time.
The felon.
Yes.
My husband's a felon, so
yeah.
I'm not like, no shade to felons.
Yeah. A lot of, I mean, I've had children with them, so, you know, I get it. But I did horrible things. There was a time, even after high school, where I asked him to come hang out with me and buy me beer because he was old enough to. And I ended up taking it and him to a hotel room where 2 other dudes were, where I decided to be like, fuck you, I'm flirting with this guy. And Kelly bought the room. Bought the beer. And then I bought porn on the TV on his account after I told him I don't love you, I'm never going to. And he left absolutely shattered.
And was that the end for a while? Like that was in high school?
That was a part where we didn't talk for a long time. Mm-hmm. But the time where we had sex was after high school and after I had sort of committed to staying with the felon for a while. And we were going just on a date because I think I was single. Again, I must have been.
Okay, so you were dating the felon, then you broke up with the felon, and then now you're single.
Yeah, now I'm single. Okay. I'm like, do you want to go to a movie? Or maybe he invited me to a movie.
Okay.
And on the way to the movie, I was like, or we could just go to your house and have sex. And he's like, all right. Because he was waiting for me to say that's what I want to do. Even though we had insane amount of makeout sessions and like me sleeping over at his house, just sleeping. Like, plenty of opportunity. But even that, the only time we had sex was, I made it horrible. I wouldn't let him see me naked. And he'd been like waiting his whole life to. And I was like, no, you have to turn the lights off. And looking back, I'm like, my tits were fucking immaculate. That is so wasted. Gosh, that's a bummer that you didn't see them then. But I found pictures, so he has seen what they looked like before kids. But I wouldn't let him see me with the lights on. He was very tender and was like trying to do all of this foreplay. And even that made me very uncomfortable because the attention was on me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, just do it. And then I turned around so I wouldn't even look at him.
It's easier to be like an object, I feel like, when you have low self-worth and be like, just treat me like I'm a whole, you know, like I don't want to have like this romantic.
Didn't want anyone going down on me because I felt like you're looking at me or it's like I'm supposed to be, it's just way too much attention on me. And so he's like, that was not how I imagined our first time would go. And then I think after that, because it again felt really real, I pushed him away really hard. And then 9/11 happened. And I was still in high school and he wasn't.
Wait, this whole story, we're still in high school?
It's like right when we're getting out of high school. Okay, so my felon boyfriend was his grade.
Okay.
Oh, so they had graduated, but I'm like still a senior.
Yes. Okay, I see.
And he decided he was going to enlist and go into the military. And it was December 9th that he shipped out. And he was like, I'm on this plane and I should have been thinking about how I'm never going to see my mom and dad again or my brother. And he's like, I just was thinking about you the whole time as he's like shipping out.
Oh my God.
And so I go off, do my own thing. I go to college. He comes back. So I'm with someone, he's with someone, and we reconnect, but in a friend way. Mm-hmm. And so we stayed friends that whole time. He actually was engaged and going to marry someone who I think I would have loved, because she sounds a lot like me, but she took her own life.
Oh, wow.
When they were, I think he was 27
Oh my God,
when that happened.
So traumatizing.
It was, well, he found her, and he...
Oh, my God.
Horribly, I can't imagine. And I'm so proud of the work that he's done to deal with that and to process that, because that
I don't know
really
if I could
fuck
ever
somebody
process
up.
something like. I feel like I'd be so fucked up if that ever, like.
I think
Yeah.
the military helps you compartmentalize stuff,
Yeah,
so maybe
for
there's some
sure.
skills there, but like just horrifying.
Yeah.
Horrifying.
Yeah.
And then a landlord of the apartments wouldn't let him break his lease and move out of there. So he had to stay living there. He was the one that replaced the carpet. Like, just, I couldn't even imagine.
No.
And so I think at this point I had gotten to a place where I was feeling very religious. And I was going to church a lot. I got sober. I got sober off of drugs, and it was like the pendulum swung for a little bit. And I was trying. It was that, I think that was the beginning of a lot of attempts to try to find a better way and feel better about myself, and to change some of the habits that I had. And so I took him to church after it happened, and he was drunk and sad, and I just tried to be there for him. But he was very broken at that time, and I didn't know how to deal with it. And I was also dating my oldest son's dad. And so I didn't feel like it was super appropriate to like continue the relationship of like being there for him a lot. I regret that. He doesn't ever say that he cared about that, but there was a period where we didn't talk very much after that, and I just kind of let him deal with all of the trauma from that. And then I got pregnant, and I was having a baby, and I was finishing college and working, and I was doing all of this stuff.
Also, question. I know you used to be a stripper.
Yes.
Was this before all of this happened, or was it after?
So it was after he shipped out, shortly after he shipped out, because I dropped out of high school 3 months to go because they said your grades aren't good enough to graduate. And I was like, well, fine, fuck you then. And I just asked off the whole summer, and then like caught my snap, and I was like, you're not a girl who doesn't finish high school. That is not who you are. We know that much. And so I went and stayed with my aunt, my mom's sister, who is like the total opposite of my mom. She's very strict. She runs a very strict house. She lived in a very small town where she knew everyone. And I was like, that's where I can go to just like get rid of all the boys, all the drugs, everything that's holding me back. And I know that she'll make me finish, even if it's like somewhere I don't want to be. And so I did. I went back to school for 3 months and graduated and got my diploma. And then I was like, well, I'm going to go to college. And I applied to PSU, and I got in. But when it came time to fill out my financial aid, because I was still young enough that I needed my parents to, my mom wouldn't do that. And so I was talking to my dad, who was with Chris and living in Seattle, and he was like, well, my job my company got bought out and they're moving us to Houston. If you want to come with us, we'll pay for you to go to school. And I was like, okay, cool, great. Yeah. So we move out there, and I don't know anyone, and they've got me set up at community college. So this is like the first me going into college. So Kelly is either still in the military, or he had come home and was with his girlfriend. And they were like, okay, well, we paid for your school, and I was smoking back then, and they were like, well, you need to get a job just to pay for like your smokes and your gas and stuff. And I was like, okay. went all these places looking for a job. Even Hooters turned me down. And let me tell you, like, I was just like...
You have
she has incredible boobs.
Yeah, Taylor and I know very well. They're stunning boobs.
Yeah.
Well, and they were my 20-year-old boobs. They were like, I was like, I'm the poster child.
You are.
They asked me what kind of tree I would be if I was a tree in my interview. So
Hooters?
I'm not going to give it a lot of stock.
This is why Hooters is going out of business.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Horrible. Like, what is the right answer? What are you looking for there?
Yeah.
So weird. But because of my personality and how I was at parties in high school, and how promiscuous I was comfortable being, everybody was like, oh my God, you should be a stripper. You'd be so good at it. And I didn't know anyone there. So I was like, well, maybe I'll just like go waitress at one. I'm hot enough to waitress at one for sure. And so the first one I walked into, she was like, can you start today? Great. And it was really fun. But I got asked all the time, right? Men always want, the one woman in the room they can't have. And so constantly they'd be like, well, how much for you? How much for you? And I'm like, I just sip your soda. Okay, calm down.
Yeah.
But I became friends with the girls, and one night they got me drunk on Crown Royal. Somebody gave me shoes and a dress, and I went up there, and I made so much money that they were sweeping it off of the stage with a broom into like buckets, and I was like, done after that.
Yeah,
Oh
I
my
mean,
God.
what
Sold.
more do you need?
Okay,
Like,
I have like a mini story just to add to
Yes.
this. So there's this one really, really good documentary about this strip club in Atlanta. I think it's on Vice or something, and I'm forgetting what it's just like one of the most famous strip clubs, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And they're talking to the dancers and they're showing all these things, and they're showing the dancers leaving at the night with trash bags, and they're all holding trash bags, and one of them is talking, and she's like, a really good night of work for me is when I'm walking around like the section I'm in and it feels like I'm walking on carpet because I'm walking on so much money. And I'm just like, like, I just like, it's like the dream, right?
Yeah.
It's like to feel like you're walking like your money carpet. And it's
Yes.
$100 bills, of course. Like it's not like.
Yeah, and so the first place I worked at wasn't very nice, but as I got comfortable, I was like, I'm going to go try to find somewhere else to work. And Houston has amazing gentlemen's clubs.
Okay.
The place where I worked was called the Men's Club. That's the second place I went. And this was like, you couldn't have any tattoos. You had to like interview for it, where they would like ask you to get naked and they would check for tattoos, piercings, things like that.
Wow.
I was one of the only girls that worked there that didn't have fake tits or plastic surgery. Like they were very strict about the look because it was very high end. Because it was $500 an hour to be with me.
Just
at
to
that
like have
place.
a private room?
Yes.
Wow.
And so I remember the first night that I made $2,500 in a night just off of one person, and my boyfriend at the time was DJing, and I was like, guess how much money I made? And he's like, 1,000. I'm like, keep going. And he kept going and keep going. He's like, no way. And I was like, yes. And one of them at one point, we had stayed up talking. He never asked me to take my clothes off. He's like, I just want to talk to you. Paid $500 an hour just to talk to me. And then the club was closing. And it's like, okay, well, we have to go. And he's like, no, we don't. And I was like, no, we do. And he's like, no, I'll be right back. And he went and got the manager. He paid the manager more money to stay open for the liability of keeping a club open past 2:30. He paid the DJ to stay and keep playing music. And then I was like, well, my boyfriend works at a different club and I have our car, and usually I pick him up on the way home. He's like, that's fine, I'll send my driver to go pick him up and take him home.
Oh
wow.
my God.
This is some high roller shit.
Yeah.
So that was that life. That was very hard to leave.
Yeah.
But it was because I got so strung out on drugs.
Got
Hard
it.
drugs. Like in
Okay.
high school I did party drugs like ecstasy and Molly and stuff like that, and pot. But when I danced, I had ended up doing like a lot of cocaine, really bad on cocaine, and then eventually meth as well before I like really got clean and sober.
I
So
imagine
that
it's
was
probably
what
so hard
caused
to
me
not
to leave.
do when you're making that kind of money. It's so
Yeah.
easy to just be like, I can do all the coke I want because
Your
I have
job
all
is
this
to
fucking
party.
cash.
Well, and when it's all around you too, like constantly when like
For free.
all your clients,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Or clients want you to do it with them.
Yeah.
Like I had famous like lawyers from very, very, very famous cases.
Can you tell us afterwards when we're not recording?
Yeah.
Okay.
Who were like paying for sex with me and doing cocaine off my ass and like just the people you wouldn't even that seem so straight-laced. Everybody's doing it.
Yeah.
So it's a really hard environment to be in when you have a really addictive personality and background. But I did get clean and I did move home.
So tell us about maybe the process of getting your life together. Like getting sober sounds like a religious journey. Like what else took place?
So it wasn't the first time I had tried to quit, but it did get so bad where I'd be like up for 3 days. I didn't know I'd been up for 3 days. I came home for a visit to see my parents, and I was in a size 0 jean, like holding it up.
Oh, wow.
And which I'm not built to be that thin. And my mom saw me get off the plane, and she was like, we're going to just need to go get you some different clothes because your dad's going to have a hard time seeing you like this. It was that bad.
Wow.
Where I saw a picture of me naked and I looked like Skeletor. I didn't even recognize who it was. And it was not cute. Did not look good. I just looked like wasted away. And that's when I was like, I really need to get clean. So I came home and I moved to live here. I did dance for a little bit because it was what I knew. But then I decided to get a job at a childcare center because my mom worked for that company. And I was doing both for a little bit, not really doing any drugs, except for pot at that point. And my coworkers found out that I was stripping, and they told our boss. And even though this was very inappropriate and I don't think it was legal for her to do, she essentially said, you need to either choose that or this because I'm not going to continue to employ you if you're doing that. And so I quit dancing, and this was 2007 maybe. And my parents had tried to get me to go to church forever. And when you think of what I explained our childhood was, it was my youngest sister that started going to church and she got saved. And then my other sister, and then my mom, and then my stepdad finally at the end. So they're all Christians now. They're all going to church and they're all trying to get me to go. And I remember being passed out in the front row hungover. One of the times they dragged me because I was just not about it.
Yeah.
But there was just one day where I went over to my mom's and I was like, I feel like I want to go. She's like, okay.
Probably made her day.
Oh, yeah. She didn't even know how to deal with it. She
Yeah.
just didn't even know how to respond. And we go to church, and I just felt like this pull, right? And they always do the, like, if you want to come up at the end.
Yeah.
And I said, I feel like I want to do this, but I don't feel like good enough to do it. And my sister was like, well, let's just go talk to him. And the pastor was really young. I think he was a couple years older than me, and his dad was actually like the head pastor, but we were at like a younger kind of youth groupy night, and was talking to him, and he knew my past. And I said that that's how I was feeling, that I didn't feel that I wanted it, but I didn't feel like I was good enough. And he was like, you don't have to be. You don't have to be any different than you are right now to be accepted and be okay. And him saying that to me was so relieving. I remember I felt so light and happy and clean when I left. And I didn't ever do hard drugs again after that. I quit smoking that day, just cold turkey, after being like pack a day.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And it wasn't because I tried, and it certainly would not happen that way for everybody, for most people, but that's what happened. And so I kind of dove into that for a while and was dating someone who was quite a bit younger than me, but what I thought would be the right person to be with. and who would treat me well. I just didn't have a lot of passion for him. And he did propose to me. And I remember his mom, because I'd known his family actually for a long time. His older brother was my first kiss in middle school. So I'd known their family for a long time. And so she knew that I probably had stronger feelings for her other son than I did for him. And she was like, does he make your socks go up and down? Because if he doesn't make your socks go up and down,
Stop. What a thing.
Yeah. And I knew it was the wrong thing. And I knew that he was going to grow up a lot because he was so much younger than me. I was like, you need to go through those years. It's going to change who you are.
Mm-hmm. Was he really heartbroken when you broke it off with him?
Oh, yeah.
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 Who wouldn't be?
Yeah, I mean, no, I mean, I love you, but
everybody, it's just a wake of broken hearts. Yes. No. Yeah, I think my energy, a lot of people get attracted to my energy and drawn to it. And I'm very open with it, and I've had to learn to not really. I kind of pull it in. I like being open, but I'm way open so that even like strangers or people at bars or anybody you don't want talking to you, they can feel it. They can feel like they can talk to you. And so it's like,
you gotta say
I have to rein it in a little bit. Yeah. But definitely I think a lot of people have had that feeling just from being with me. So I broke up with him and then kind of got away from the religious aspect of it and really like eventually Christianity in general. But I think it was a good jumping off point for personal growth. And personal growth really became important to me probably 4 years ago when I was with my youngest son's dad. And he had a lot of mental health issues that caused him to do a lot of really hurtful things to me. He cheated on me a lot, and it really like fucked up my mind and what I thought reality was, like to the point where he had gotten a new job and he, from out of the gate, told everybody that we weren't together, we don't live together. Meanwhile, like, me and his baby are at home making him dinner. And I'm thinking we have the best relationship ever because when he's with me, he acted very different. He just set that stage so that he could be doing other things outside of our relationship.
Got it. Okay.
And it was a lot of that.
Were you like catching him or was he telling you?
Oh, yeah.
That?
Oh, no, I caught him every time.
Okay.
And he couldn't admit it.
Okay, so he never was admitting it. It was just like...
One of the times was he slept with the woman who took our newborn photos of my son. Oh. And I can't even look at the photos.
Oh my God.
Like just horrible. And I was sitting on the couch with him and I saw him get a pussy picture on his phone. And I knew he had cheated on me before, and I knew that it was a mental thing. And I just thought, if I can create a space where it's like, we can talk about this, you can be honest with me, we can figure it out and get you some help.
Yeah.
I sat there calmly and I said, do you want to talk about that? And he's like, what? And I said, I saw what it is already, and I'm being calm, and I'm telling you, I just want you to talk to me about it and tell me the truth. And it's okay. Couldn't do it.
That's the most chill response you could ever have.
Ever.
It was.
It
was. I will give myself that.
Yeah.
Because I am cool as shit. I can deal with anything as long as you tell me the truth. You could tell me there's a body in the trunk and we need some shovels. And as long as I know, I'll be like, okay. Like, that's what we're doing now.
Yeah.
But he could not be honest. Even when I would catch him, he would never apologize. He would never deny it. He would never try to it was almost like he just shut down. Because he really thinks he's a piece of shit, which he is. But, I mean, he does what he does because he has the worst self-worth and has had, unfortunately, much worse trauma than I have. Like, he was a felon. So he was in prison. So obviously there was rape, there was abuse. There was really bad abuse in his childhood. And also sexual abuse when he was really young of like his dad's girlfriends and wives and stuff.
Oh my God.
Just very sick. And so, you know, I knew he was really fucked up. I knew that going into it. But again, I'm like, I think that even up through my 20s, I thought, well, everyone can do what I can do. Everyone can turn their life around. Everyone can be adaptable and resilient. Everyone can change if they're supported. No, they can't.
Yeah.
They really can't. And I've learned that it is more rare, some of the skills that I've developed. But early on, before I knew that, it caused me to trust people I probably shouldn't trust or give people too many chances.
Yeah. And it's so hard because it's like when someone's like a sex addict or whatever like mental health thing it is that's going on that's like causing them to do these like behaviors that are ruining their life. It's like, even if they can see that it's ruining their life, like that's not always enough to make people want to change. Like sometimes they have to burn things down to the ground multiple times.
Yes.
You know, and like you may not be the one where they're like, okay, I fucked this relationship up, I want to fix it. They might have to do it 5 more times.
Which he did.
You know?
Yeah. He had burned it to the ground. I love that you use that because that's exactly what I use to describe it. I was the longest relationship he had. We were together for almost 5 years. And the longest relationship he had had before me was less than a year with his wife before he met me.
Wow.
Who he divorced while we were getting together. Which I met her and talked to her and learned a lot from her about who he was. But I mean, there were relationships where he literally just walked away and left all of it. Every piece of clothing, every shoe, every memory, he would just walk away. He didn't care about anything because if you care about something, it can hurt.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, exactly what you said, where he would burn it down and walk away multiple times. And at least he was able to stay with me for as long as he did. And I know that he loved me and wanted it to work, but he just wasn't there yet. I had just gotten laid off from Papa Murphy's. It was October 2020. And 2 weeks after, it was funny because he handled my layoff in such a great way. I'd never been let go from a job and I took it really hard. And he was so perfect, so supportive. Like I thought we were in the best place ever. And then 2 weeks later, I caught him doing it again with someone at work. And I was just like, I'm done. I've had enough.
And how old was your son at this point?
He was 3. I'm so bad at timelines, but I think he had just turned 3.
Okay. So you have like a
toddler.
toddler.
Wait, I know his birthday. He is 3.
Okay.
He was 3. Wow. And I kicked him out of the house, but he would still come over to visit our son. And there was, I think eventually he said, can I live downstairs? Because we had a 3-story house and the downstairs was essentially its own room and bathroom with the garage. And then like the living areas were the other 2 floors. And so we had a live-in nanny when we were together who stayed down there.
That's nice.
But she had left. Well, it was the only way I could afford one. Her room and board was part of her.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was part of her compensation.
That's my dream. It sounds so nice. Yeah.
So good.
I feel like that's the way to go.
It is. But she had moved out, and so he was like, can I just live down there? And I was like, I don't think it's a good idea. And then COVID happened. And I thought he was going to get laid off. I didn't have a job. It was like interfering with like him being able to take care of Everett. And so I was like, eventually I said, okay. And it worked out okay for a while. But then one night, one of my girlfriends was over, we're having food, and he would let the kids play in his room. And I had asked him, I did my due diligence. I said, is everything picked up? There's nothing that they could get into down there. And he's like, no, they can go play. And so her and I are in the kitchen making food, and the boys are in his room playing, and he comes home and he starts just screaming at me. And I go downstairs, and Everett had like dumped out a bottle of like Allyse liquid gels or something. And he was really upset about it, but overly upset. Like, obviously Everett didn't eat any.
Yeah.
They're just out, and he's having a reaction. But because he was yelling so bad and the kids were right there, I was like, just give me the kids. We're just going to send them upstairs. They don't need to see us fighting. And he didn't want to give me Everett at first, but then he did. And I sent the kids up to the second floor where my friend was. And he was just berating me, telling me I was a bad mom, like all this stuff that clearly wasn't true, but he's having an episode. And so I go upstairs because he's that upset. And I told my friend, I was like, I think we need to be done for today, and that maybe I'll just take the kids and go somewhere while he cools off. And he came upstairs and he took my keys out of the drawer, and he's like, you're not going anywhere. And that sparked a very intense fight where we struggled to get my keys, and he had his arm around me, and I like bit him to get away from him. It was really bad. Thank God my kids didn't see it, and my friend was there because she
could like
knew what to do. But it was very intense, and the cops got called. And at first he left, and he was leaving me alone, and then he came in the house after this had initially happened. And oh, sorry, I'm getting confused. I did leave that night, and he's like, well, where are you taking them? And I was like, I don't know. I'm just leaving. And even though I just went to a friend's house, like, he lost it. It was a trigger. He thought he was losing his son. He thought I was taking his son from him. And he absolutely had a mental breakdown. It was very bizarre, the whole thing. And the cop that went and showed up for him was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense that he's had a mental breakdown. That explains a lot of what happened and how he was behaving with me. But then he wouldn't leave the house, wouldn't let us come home. And I said, I'm not. And he said, just bring him back. And I said, I'm not bringing those kids back there if you're there. And he said, well, I'm not leaving this house. And I said, okay. So I went to go stay with my sister and her husband and their kids. And I had explained to him on the phone, we're not married. And because I wasn't married to my oldest son's dad, I know the law. And that if we're not married, we both have equal rights to him. You can take him across state lines and never come back, and I can't do anything about it because we don't have a parenting plan, we don't have anything, and we both have the right to do so.
I didn't
so
know
I
that,
don't
actually.
trust
I didn't
you.
know that either.
Oh yeah. If you're not married, you both have equal rights. And so,
what's the difference if you are married?
Well, if you are, it is as well. But it's important for people who aren't married to know that.
Okay.
And so you have to have something in place. You have to have a parenting plan that outlines parenting time and who has him what days that you've both agreed to. You don't. If you both agree, you can just draft it up. They're free online. But if you don't agree, it's usually mediation or court, and then that's final. And so I said, once we have a parenting plan and we both sign it, I will be comfortable letting you have him again if you're calm. And so I started working on one. 2 days later, I was served with a restraining order because he had gotten a lawyer, and his lawyer was like, well, what do you want? He's like, I just want my son back. And he's like, oh, I know how to get your son back. If you file a restraining order against her for biting you, she has to give him back immediately, even before we go to court to decide if the restraining order is actually valid.
What?
That's the law. And it is
such a dirty trick.
It's honestly supposed to protect women who are in an abusive relationship where it's an immediate danger to the child, and like you need to take them right away, and legally you can. And then we'll figure it out later with a judge. So it is built for that, but his slimy, skeezy lawyer took advantage of that rule in order to appease him and give him back his son. even though he shouldn't have had him back at that time. And so then I had to get a lawyer. And that whole ordeal, because I also like have a panic disorder that I've always had, sent me way into overdrive with fight or flight. Like my body shut down. I had to go to the hospital because I've had really bad anxiety at times, but I had new symptoms I had never had. Like I was basically bowel movements were like yellow liquid, highlighter yellow. And I was like, what is that? And they were like, it's bile and stuff from your stomach. And it's from chronic stress. It is a symptom of you're in chronic stress. Your body can't do anything.
Damn.
I had no idea that was like a thing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And also like when you're in fight or flight a lot, all of the energy goes to like that emotion and like getting you out of where you are. So you don't heal as well. Like your skin, if you have a cut, it will be there for a long time. Your nails don't grow. You can't eat. You just kind of, like my skin felt kind of like tissue paper, like greasy, kind of crepey.
Yeah.
Although,
It
like,
didn't
kind
feel
of
like
background
skin.
stuff is not
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, because your body's not taking care of itself.
Yeah.
And you're unwell. And that happened a lot for a long time. It took like 428 days for this to actually be done.
Wow.
That's how long I was in, like, during COVID, trying to talk to a lawyer. I had no job. I had no place to live. I had nothing. And it was the scariest thing I've ever gone through.
Did you have your son at all? Like
I
you guys
did.
taking-
I had him
okay.
most of the time. So it's funny because in the restraining order, you have to say, does this person get them at all? Do they get them 0? Like, what are you comfortable with? And he said, well, she can have him Monday through Friday, but I want him on the weekends because he worked.
Yeah.
So it was like he didn't have anyone to watch him, so he would still let me have him, but he took away all of my weekends with him. And so I was only with my sister for 2 months. I ended up getting a job and moving back here, but still, and it was an in-person job. I had to like act like everything was fine in my life and that I wasn't dealing with this on a constant basis. Because I was working then shortly after the restraining order took effect, and it was in effect, the parenting time was in effect until we came to an agreement. So the restraining order was lifted. My lawyer got him to take it away, but the parenting time stayed because we hadn't had a judgment or agreement.
Okay.
And so for over a year, I saw my son for maybe 2 hours a day because it was getting him ready in the morning or picking him up at night and doing bedtime. And I didn't have any weekends with him for over a year. And then that was really hard. And Kelly was, when he had his mental breakdown, Kelly was the one that came. And, Kelly and I have always been there for each other during these really hard life moments.
Okay, and then when we started talking about this, you were saying how like this was also the time where you were like really focusing on like just your
getting
personal
back to the
growth and
self-care and personal growth. So it had started while I was with my ex in a really bad situation, but after I decided to leave him, it became even more important to me. And so even though I was dealing with like how degenerative like my stress level was, I was still like working out, eating very healthy, and working on my mental attitude. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah.
And I found something that really worked for me. My friend had said, because we also all were talking about personal development and stuff like that. She's like, have you ever listened to Abraham Hicks? And I was like, what is that? She's like, well, it's a woman who's like a spiritual teacher, but she like, Abraham is the voices she hears. And I was like, okay. No, I don't think I'm into it. Thank you though. And she's like, well, just listen to this. And she sent me a clip of something on YouTube. And the way that she taught, because she teaches law of attraction.
Okay.
And the way that she explained it resonated so well with me. So for example, like I had grown up hearing things like, no one makes you feel anything. No one's making you upset. You're choosing to be upset, which pissed me off to no end because my emotions were always so big and so intense. And I was like, I'm not choosing this. I'm not letting it happen. The reality is happening to me and I'm having a response. But it's because nobody, people say that saying and nobody really says practically how to do that, how to change that or how to avoid that. But I think that was probably in the clip that she sent me, that first one where, the teaching was actually practically how do you shift that thinking? How do you take that energy out of it and how do you shift your focus? So for example, a subject can be like two ends of a stick. Like maybe it's your job. And you can look at one end where it's like everything that you don't like about it. And when you give your attention to that part of it, it affects your mood. It affects everything, right? Energetics, the opportunities that come to you at that job, the relationships you have at that job, because you're focusing your energy on that end of the stick. But if you could find things that you did like about your job and let that be the reality, because I think we anchor ourselves on the negative so much, or the reality of something, like boudoir, for example. Like, there's probably a ton of women that want to do it, and I think that they don't because they're worried that they're not pretty enough or it's not going to look right or whatever, because someone told them some aspect about themselves was a certain way. And they accepted that external thing as a validation of a reality. Instead of, and like, they let that one little thing, like their belly or their whatever, be the one thing that is the reason that they don't, because they're focusing on that one thing. When if they would look at the other end, which probably has way more stuff on it about how you obviously want to, you will feel you want to. Anything we want it because we feel like we would feel good in the having of it or the having done it. And so it's like, you obviously want this. You think you would enjoy it. Everyone else, looks beautiful when they're done. You're drawn to working with these women.
You have great tits.
Yeah,
like,
that there are so many other
features
features that you like, and that you have people in your life that like those things about you and think you're so beautiful. But we don't ever take those to validate our reality. And I think that keeps people from doing a lot of the things that they want to do.
For sure.
Starting their own business, creating their own podcast.
Yeah.
It's like we'll find the one reason not to do it, and let that be our guiding light instead of all the reasons why we should do it. And one of the other things I learned was that everyone's perception is their own reality. So when I got laid off just from this last job, everybody's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm like, why? Best fucking thing that could have happened. Best, it really was. I hated that job. I hated my boss. It was very stressful and demanding. I sacrificed a lot of time with my kids after already sacrificing a lot of time with my kids for that job because I thought I could better our lives with it. And everything happened so perfectly. It was like the universe just took it and was like, none of this is for you anymore. I got a, what do you call it? It's not a settlement and it's not a stipend. It's an S word.
I know what you're talking
right?
about. Oh,
yeah. They gave me money.
Yeah.
They gave me a package when I left.
Oh, severance.
Severance, thank you.
That's the best, getting laid off
Yes.
when you get severance, and then you can also get unemployment after.
Yes.
Usually.
And
So much
it was
better.
right before the holidays again, so it's like I got to recalibrate my nervous system, and I got to remove all of the things that were making that hard for me to do, and money wasn't an issue, and I could be really selective about the next job that I took. So like there were all these reasons where I was like, this couldn't have worked out more perfectly. But to everybody else, it was like, oh, I'm so sorry. So it's just like, that's a great example of you can both watch the same thing happen and both have entirely different perceptions of it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize that. It's probably one of the challenges that Kelly and I have now, where I try to explain to him when we fight that I understand your intent. He feels like he has to argue his intent. I didn't mean that, or here's what I was trying to do, or here's what I saw. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I know, I'm not upset about that. What I'm trying to communicate is that that's not how it came across to me. That's not how I interpreted it. And how I interpreted it had nothing to do with you. It had to do with my lens of my life and the way that I view things. It doesn't mean you're wrong. It means it felt a different way to me. And I think that concept has been a little bit hard for him to grasp, because he's very like black and white. This is what happened. It happened for everyone. You know, it's a really hard concept.
I feel like that's like all of me and Colin's fights is like, he says something, it comes off a certain way to me, and I'm like, this hurt my feelings. And he's like, but this is what I meant. And it's like,
yep.
Okay, but you need to change the way you talk about it, or you need to do this differently. And he's sort of like, okay, I guess, but like also it doesn't feel fair. It's just like, yeah, I feel like
they're not
really
choosy with their
for a
words
lot.
either.
Yeah. It's probably very common for men and women to relate that way.
Yeah,
I feel like.
Yeah,
because they're, I don't know, they're just not socialized to talk about emotions as much, so they're fucking bad at it sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and the hard thing is I've put so much effort into my growth and development that I've gotten so far away from most people. And my family, we all have a pretty decent relationship now, even, you know, after the way I grew up. But even my parents will say that now. They're like, Allyse, you have these problems with us or your sisters because you're just so advanced in that. You have that skill and it's easy for you now. And none of us have those skills. And I don't know if your sisters ever will. So it's really challenging for me in my relationships, because it went from my lack of self-worth causes problems in relationships because I accept disrespect, to now it's swung the other way. I don't accept any disrespect and I don't have any tolerance for it, but I kind of have to understand that other people aren't there yet.
Yeah.
And that's a really fine line. So I was telling Anna that we like had a big fight where I was like, I can't marry you. You broke a relationship promise. Because we don't fight very often. But when we fight, our traumas come out.
The story yet.
Let me go back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should we go back to Kelly and go back to how we got back to... Oh, we did get back together.
No, you haven't got back together in your story.
Tell us how you got back together.
Okay. So he was there and he helped me when my ex was having that mental breakdown. Just as like protection and someone to be there with me and support. But then because I was dealing with the trial and working, I don't think I talked to him for another year. After that, I didn't talk to hardly anyone. And after everything was settled, I finally felt like I could relax again. And that's when he was like, well, why don't you let me make you food? Let me make you dinner. And so I went over there and he made this insanely elaborate dinner, even with like a chocolate cake for dessert. Like,
wow.
I mean, like over the top.
Did
like
he
it was
bake
like
the cake?
shrimp. Oh yeah. Oh, he's a baker and a cook. He's
wow.
very skilled. You know, all the things. I was like having wine. We had so much to catch up on, and I like had a lot of wine. And I don't think he was drinking at all. So it was just me just getting sloshed and like talking about everything under the sun with him. And then I got too drunk to drive. He put me to bed. I faintly remembered him kissing my forehead. Which is like...
so precious.
Forehead kisses are life. And later he said he went outside and had a couple beers and chain smoked. And he's like, and I just thought about our entire life together. I thought about what it would mean for me as a man to take this on and be a dad to those boys. And I knew that you were going to have to work through a lot of things. And He's like, and I just saw all of it and I knew it was worth it and I knew it was what I wanted. And he had been really hurt by his ex. He actually was with someone when I was with mine who was cheating on me, who was cheating on him. And so we were supporting each other again as friends, dealing with that. And so he'd been hurt and taken advantage of. And he had sworn off women. He was like, I'm never doing this again. But he's like, that night I decided it was, you were worth taking off all the armor and walking out there vulnerable, accepting that if I get hurt, I get hurt. And that it was worth it.
Such a sweet way of saying
I
it.
know.
Yeah. And I didn't know that, but then, I wake up and he's on the couch. And we just got to talking. And this was a point in my life where I had also said I'm never going to be in a relationship again, but I had been single and not having sex for like a year. And so I was like, well, I'm going to get on this app that's just for sex, which is where we can get into all of the screening for that kind of sex. That is an important step. And so I initiated it by, he said some things and I was like, oh my God, it might be really fun for us to have sex. And at one point I was like, you're single. I'm single. We love and trust each other. Like, why aren't we fucking?
And at this point, you guys hadn't had sex since like that one.
The one time.
The one time that was the bad.
The one time that was in the dark.
Yeah.
Where I was facing away from him.
Yes.
Poor guy. And so I had said that, and he was kind of like, okay, even though later he was like, I knew, he's like, this isn't sex. We're going to fall in love. And he's like, if she wants to say it's just sex and that makes her feel better, that's fine. But he's like, I already know. And that day, he'd been waiting 20 years. And that morning, after we like had that talk and I just said we should do that, and I was about to leave, was when he picked me up and put me on the counter and kissed me like I'd never been kissed before. I mean, the kind that makes you feel like you're dumb. Like that and the funny thing is that we've been together now for almost 2 years again, and still when he kisses me, like I forget to breathe sometimes. He kisses me every day like that day. He makes love to, it's the best sex I've ever had in my life. The sex is like he's unwrapping a gift that he's waited his whole life to receive. Every fucking time. Every fucking time.
What is he doing? Gavin, if you're listening, you need to talk.
Write that down.
Yeah,
write that down.
Podcast. Take fucking notes. First of all, picking your girl up and putting her on the counter.
The hottest.
Literally the hottest thing
the
you
hottest.
can do.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
I didn't tell you the first time he kissed me in high school.
All right, this is where I'm cutting off the episode. So this story is wild, and it just is going to get even more crazy. I hope everyone is enjoying it so far. Allyse is amazing. We are so obsessed with her. Come back for part 2 next week. Next week, we're going to go really deep into OnlyFans. We're also going to discuss apps where it's like just for like hooking up. We're going to talk about more about this like self-worth story that's been like woven in, and we're going to cover anal hooks again. So if you remember our episode with Lauren where we first talked about anal hooks, that's coming back next episode. So just wait. Can't wait for all of you to hear it. See you next Tuesday. Bye. 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 Next Tuesday.